Hello there, and welcome to Echoes of the Imperium. I'm truly glad you've arrived. Maybe it's been a long day, or maybe you're the kind of soul who prefers to drift into sleep with thoughts of distant stars and ancient cosmic secrets instead of counting sheep. Either way, tonight's journey belongs to you. You don't need to do anything now, just rest. Let your mind grow quiet, your breath steady, and your body feel lighter, as if even the pull of gravity has begun to fade away.
If I had known that the fall of mankind would begin with a heartbeat, one single, ruptured echo that rolled across Terra like the sigh of a dying god, I would have tried to remember the Emperor's voice more clearly. But in those last hours before the Warmaster claimed his life, all I could hear was the crushing silence that replaced hope, a silence thick enough to drown armies and smother faith. And as I crouched beneath the fractured colonnade of the Imperial Palace with dust choking my lungs and ash coating my tongue, I realized the truth most loyalists had refused to accept. Chaos had not come to conquer. It had come to finish a war that began before humanity ever crawled from old Earth's oceans. A war older than language, older than flesh, older than the very concept of light. And as the palace walls trembled with the booming footsteps of traitor titans, great lumbering monsters of Adam, iron and demonic, Spitey felt the weight of inevitability press down on my shoulders until my bones creaked. The sky above Terra was no longer a sky but a wound, torn open by warp storms that pulsed like diseased veins, dripping tendrils of unreality that twisted through the air like serpents hungry for human fear. And every few seconds, a screeching chorus drifted from that cosmic tear as demons clawed at the veil, their silhouettes flickering like shadows cast by a fire that should not exist. I remember gripping my recorder, half broken, half melted, still warm from the plasma burst that killed its former owner, and forcing myself to whisper descriptions into it. Because if I could not fight for the Imperium, I could at least record its death, preserve the memory of what it once meant to be human before the galaxy drowned in madness. But even that small act felt impossible under the shadow of the Warmaster's betrayal. I saw Horus guards help me. I saw him not merely as the Primarch he once was, but as something new, something ascendant, wrapped in a corona of shifting warp light that bled through the air like molten gold mixed with shadow. His armor cracked and steaming, covered in runes carved by beings older than time, each line pulsing like a heartbeat of its own. And in his hand he held the Emperor's body, limp, golden, cracked like a shattered statue, his blood dripping onto the marble floor and sizzling as though reality itself burned at its touch. The traitor legions surrounded their Warmaster in reverent silence, thousands upon thousands of Astartes who had once sworn oaths to protect mankind, now kneeling like zealots before a monster of their own making, their armor warped by the touch of their new gods, glowing with sickly sigils that crawled across ceramite like living tattoos. Lorgar stood with them, chanting blasphemies that twisted the air into spirals of darkness, his word-bearers swaying like cultists in a trance while glowing scripture etched itself automatically into their armor, each line a prayer of damnation. Nearby, Angron howled in triumph, his roar shaking the palace foundations, the butcher's nails inside his skull glowing red-hot as demons clung to his armor like parasites feeding on rage. Above us, the sky cracked, yes, cracks splitting open like a glass dome beneath enormous pressure, and through it I saw shapes moving, titanic silhouettes, claws larger than titans, eyes burning like dying suns. Watching Terra with a hunger so vast my mind recoiled, my vision blurred, and I tasted blood as my nose began to bleed. I stumbled backward, my breath ragged, my vision swimming as psychic pressure crashed down across the battlefield, flattening banners, shattering stone, and driving lesser minds into writhing agony. And in that suffocating moment I understood, the Emperor was dead, truly dead, his soul no longer anchoring humanity, no longer shielding us from the nightmares that had waited so long to devour us. Then Horus spoke, not aloud, but within the mind, his voice slithering into my thoughts like cold oil pouring through cracks I didn't know existed. A voice layered with thousands of echoes, each representing a memory stolen, a soul consumed, a world conquered. And he whispered, "Witness the birth of the new age." And the palace shook violently as tendrils of warp stuff curled around the golden throne. The throne, once the beating heart of the Imperium, transformed before my eyes, its gold melted into a grotesque lattice of bone and sinew, its machinery twisting into flesh-like cables that pulsed with sickly rhythm, and the corpses of the custodies who died defending it were absorbed into its structure, their armor creaking as their bodies liquefied into the throne's new demonic shape. I watched in horror as the throne awakened, awakened its mouth like fissures opening with wet slurps as it drank the Emperor's spilled blood, absorbing it into itself, and the warp screamed in ecstasy, its roar echoing across every corridor and chamber of the Imperial Palace. The ground beneath me buckled, splitting into cracks that spewed green fire as demonic claws yanked themselves up into the world, pulling twisted forms that blended flesh and iron, their bodies dripping molten water, their mouths filled with teeth that clicked like snapping chains. I turned and ran, not because I had any destination in mind, but because instinct demanded movement, demanded escape. Even though escape was now impossible, the palace collapsing behind me, giant marble statues of the Emperor and his sons melting into pools of shimmering flesh, Imperial aquillas cracking and rearranging themselves into sigils of chaos. Corpses rose from the ground as possessed puppets, whispering prayers to dark gods with voices that no longer sounded human. The air tasted of sulfur, copper, and rot, every breath burning my lungs as if I inhaled acid, and psychic aftershocks rippled through the corridors like invisible tidal waves that made my thoughts stutter and fracture. I stumbled into a hall once filled with Imperial scholars, now warped into a maze of living walls that pulsed like organs, and I saw their bodies hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers, their eyes glowing faintly as Horus's psychic will bound them into an eternal waking nightmare. I wanted to scream, but my voice refused to work. Trapped in my throat by terror as realization washed over me, this was not the fall of an empire, this was the extinction of meaning, the death of purpose, the beginning of an age defined not by conquest or rule but by corruption without end. And as I finally reached the outer ruins of the palace, gasping for breath, my legs trembling, my mind scraping against the edge of madness, I understood the final truth that the galaxy would soon learn. Chaos had not won a victory, chaos had won everything. I did not know how long I ran through the collapsing corridors of the Imperial Palace. Hours, perhaps even days, because time had begun to blur, stretch, and fold in on itself as the warp seeped deeper into Terra's wounded heart, twisting moments like threads being pulled by invisible, malicious fingers. And as I stumbled through smoke-choked halls, illuminated only by the flickering glow of distant fires, I felt the Emperor's absence like a physical wound carved into the fabric of reality, a hollow pain radiating through every stone, every corpse, every breath of poisoned air that scraped across my throat. I found shelter in a half-collapsed archive chamber, once a sanctum of knowledge guarded by the Sigillites' trusted scribes, now a graveyard of shattered data scrolls and melted cogitator, the air filled with the metallic stench of scorched parchment and blood. And it was there, amidst the wreckage of humanity's recorded memory, that I encountered the first true survivors, loyalists driven underground not by cowardice but by duty, battered and bleeding, their minds frayed at the edges from witnessing the Warmaster's ascension. They pulled me behind barricades fashioned from broken shelves and dead souls, their voices hoarse as they spoke of battles I had not seen, tragedies so immense that even my exhausted mind struggled to grasp them. The fall of the Eternity Gate under the combined onslaught of the World Eaters and the Death Guard, the last desperate counterattack of Rogel Dawn crushed beneath the claws of demonic constructs, the dark mechanicum had birthed in twisted forges, and the psychic implosion that marked the final death scream of Sanguinius, a scream that echoed inside the skulls of every living soul on Terra, shattering weaker minds and driving others into spasms of uncontrollable grief. One of the survivors, a scarred Imperial fist with a shattered pauldron drenched in coagulated ichor, told me that Dawn himself had tried to reach the Emperor after his fall, carving a path through the traitor hordes with a fury unmatched even in legend. But he was stopped by the Warmaster's newly awakened psychic shadow, a pulsing aura of domination that stripped will from bone and courage from blood, turning even the bravest space marines into trembling statues. The Astartes' eyes dimmed when he spoke, as though remembering a pain too heavy to bear, and I felt my stomach twist as I imagined the sight. Dawn, the Praetorian of Terra, the unbreakable sun, falling to his knees, not from wounds but from despair, crafted and weaponized by his own brother. The survivors told me that the warp had begun to merge with physical space in waves, corrupting entire districts in seconds, transforming Imperial architecture into grotesque mockeries of themselves, pillars of bone and brass, doorways lined with pulsing veins, mosaics rearranging their tiles into symbols that whispered blasphemies, while the sky above flickered like a dying lumen, trapped in an eternal volcanic dusk lit only by lightning storms of impossible colors. The ground trembled constantly, as though Terra itself writhed in agony, and each tremor shook loose more demons that crawled through fractures in reality, like spider-legged infants hungry for flesh. Though we hid in the shadows, it became clear the underground archives offered no long-term salvation, for the warp had begun to seep through the walls like mold, softening stone into wet pulp and warping machine spirits into glitching, screaming ghosts that begged for release. The librarian, an elderly woman with half her face, burned away by sorcery, attempted to access a surviving data stack to search for any surviving evacuation protocol, but as soon as she activated it, the screen displayed not coordinates nor routes, but the Emperor's face twisted into a mask of torment, his eyes bleeding fire, his mouth opening to whisper a wordless warning that made her heart stop instantly, her body crumpling to the floor like a puppet with its strings cut. Panic rippled through our group, but before we could move her body, the Auspex scanners crackled with proximity alarms. Something was approaching through the damaged corridors. Something enormous, its footsteps like thunder rolling through broken marble, and we extinguished the lamps, hiding behind shattered desks as the massive silhouette of a traitor Astartes passed by, its armor fused with demonic growths, its helm stretching into a snarling visage while its backpacked vents exhaled thick tar-like smoke. It paused, sniffed the air, as though tasting our presence, and for a moment I thought we were doomed, but a distant howl, Langren's howl, unmistakable even from miles away, distracted the creature, and it continued lumbering deeper into the ruins. The fist beside me whispered that the traitor legions were not merely patrolling, they were hunting survivors for sacrifices. Fuel for Horus's ascended metamorphosis, because even gods require sustenance, and the Warmaster's new form fed on souls, devouring them to stabilize his newborn divinity. Terror clawed at my throat, but before despair could consume me entirely, a sudden blast rocked the chamber, an explosion so bright and violent it threw me across the floor, my ears ringing as debris rained down like shrapnel, and when I pulled myself up, blinking dust from my eyes, I saw a sight I had not expected. Black armored silhouettes emerging from smoke, their pauldrons marked with winged skulls, their eyes burning with stoic fury. The Raven Guard, or what remained of them, led by a grim-faced shadow captain dragging a wounded brother behind him. They had infiltrated the underground levels seeking any remnants of loyal command networks, but found only corpses, warp corruption, and echoes of psychic torment, and their expressions made it clear they no longer expected to find salvation, only resistance, only defiance, only a chance to bleed the traitors before the warp devoured everything. They told us that Gilliman's last message had been intercepted before the Astronomican died completely. A message not of hope but of mourning, acknowledging Terra's fall and urging any survivors to scatter, to run, to vanish into the stars and preserve whatever fragments of humanity they could, because the Imperium could no longer be saved. His words had broken many who heard them, but the Raven Guard remained unshaken. Corax's sons had seen darkness before, and they intended to fight in its shadow even after the Emperor's light had gone out. We followed them through crumbling tunnels lined with the charred remains of Mechanicum adepts who had attempted to stabilize the palace's infrastructure. Their bodies fused into cogitator frames like grotesque statues mid-scream, and the deeper we traveled, the colder the air became, as though we were descending into the lungs of a dying world. The tunnels shook violently every few minutes, dust falling like gray snow, and distant roars, some mechanical, some demonic, some unmistakably belonging to corrupted Astartes, echoed through the labyrinth. When we finally reached a subterranean hangar containing a battered Stormbird, hope flickered inside me, weak but undeniable. But the moment the pilots activated its machines, a psychic voice slithered through the Vox suite, mocking. Familiar, the voice of Malcador's chief attendant, who had died 2 days earlier, and she whispered, "You cannot fly from gods." Moments before, the hangar doors buckled inward as a colossal, many-limbed demon forced its way inside, its silhouette rippling like smoke trapped in flesh, its mouth stretching across its entire torso as it screamed our names in a dozen overlapping voices. The Raven Guard opened fire, bolters roaring, their shadows dancing in stuttered bursts of muzzle flash, and as they charged into battle knowing they could not win, but fighting anyway, fled with the remaining survivors through a maintenance access shaft. The demon's shrieks echoing behind us, mingling with the dying war cries of the Emperor's last sons. And as we scrambled deeper into darkness, lungs burning, legs trembling, I realized the most horrifying truth of all. We were not escaping the fall of Terra. We were surviving its transformation into something far worse. I did not witness the moment Horus ascended, I survived it. And in this age of ashes, surviving is far worse than seeing, but every soldier, mortal or transhuman, felt the moment it happened, as if the galaxy itself exhaled in terror, the stars flickering like candle flames before a storm, as a psychic roar swept from the Imperial Palace ruins across all of Terra. shaking mountains, boiling seas, and splitting the sky into screaming fractures of unreality. And even though I was buried beneath collapsing debris, half crushed under a broken Aquila statue, I heard his voice, not through my ears but inside the deepest, most private parts of my mind, a cold tide, a velvet blade, a voice that knew my fears, my memories, my secret guilt, whispering with a quiet, intimate cruelty, "He is gone. Your master is dust. Kneel and be remade." I fought it. Saints help me. I fought until my skull throbbed and my fingernails tore against the rubble, but even resisting felt like screaming at a wave to stop drowning you, because the Emperor's light, his warmth, his presence had vanished entirely, replaced by a void so suffocating it felt like the entire human species had been orphaned in a single instant. When the rubble above me shifted and collapsed again, I expected to die, to be crushed into oblivion, but instead a massive shadow dragged the stone aside with the sound of metal tearing bone. And when I looked up I saw a figure towering above me, a Terminator-clad brute in sea-green armor whose pauldrons were carved with writhing runes that twisted like serpents, his face hidden behind a horned helm that glowed with a baleful inner fire. And though he spoke no words, I knew exactly what he was, what they all were now, not servants of the Imperium or even of Horus, but newly minted apostles of chaos, infused by the tectonic psychic blast that had erupted when the Warmaster took his final step across the threshold between demigod and something infinitely worse. He seized me by the collar, lifting me as if I weighed nothing, his grip crushing my breath, and for a moment I stared into the slits of his helmet, expecting death, but instead he slowly set me down and turned away, as if I were beneath notice, a forgotten insect wandering the corpse of a dream. And as I crawled out from the ruins I realized the battlefield had changed in ways. Beyond destruction, demons stalked openly now, tearing reality like wet fabric as they drifted across the cracked marble plains, shimmering with impossible colors, their voices a mix of laughter, sobbing, and ritual chant. And among them strode the traitor legions like priests in a cathedral of slaughter, their armor reshaped into grotesque living forms, some fused with the flesh of the demons they had bargained with, others radiating a sickening aura that bent gravity, warped light, or twisted the air into distorted faces of the damned. I could see the center of the transformation clearly, the shattered throne room, now a vast crater of black glass and molten gold where the Emperor once sat, and in its center floated Horus, no longer bound by mortal dimensions, his armor glowing like the crust of a dying star, his eyes twin voids haloed in burning gold, and around him spiraled a storm of warp lightning reaching miles into the sky, ripping through clouds and dragging down fragments of orbiting debris. He looked nothing like the Warmaster of old portraits, the noble general, the beloved son, but rather like a figure sculpted from every betrayal mankind had ever committed, his form shifting subtly as if every nightmare humanity carried within its collective soul was being given shape through him. And when he spoke again, the entire planet trembled. The age of Imperium is ended. The age of my dominion begins. Even the demons paused to listen. Even the traitor Primarchs bowed their heads. I felt my mind cracking like thin ice as his voice pressed through my thoughts, forcing visions of the future into my skull. Black suns rising over dead worlds. Star systems chained together with arteries of warp fire. Entire populations kneeling before a throne of screaming faces carved into the very bedrock of Terra. And above it all stood Horus, his mantle woven from the shadows of murdered gods, his hand resting upon a galaxy shaped like a beast he intended to break. I wanted to look away, but the vision clung like hot iron against the inside of my eyes, burning itself into memory until I could smell the stench of burning synapses. When the vision finally ended, I found myself face down on the scorched ground, my nose bleeding, my pulse erratic, and above me sounded the rhythmic march of armored giants, sons of Horus, their once noble heraldry now warped by symbols that crawled like living ink across their armor plates. And at their head strode a monstrous figure, a silhouette unmistakable even amid the chaos. Abaddon, his top knot whipping in the warp, the talon of Horus dripping with molten gold from the melted remnants of the imperial throne, his expression carved from hatred older than the heresy itself. And as he passed me, he spoke in a tone devoid of warmth or contempt, merely stating a fact: you will join the new legion of the Warmaster, or you will be fed to the forge. There was no choice. Not really. Humanity had no emperor, no hope, no shield against the warp. And as the demonic sky tore open fully above Terra, spilling rivers of crimson light across the ruins, I felt the cold truth settle into my bones. Chaos had won not with a final triumph on the battlefield, but by extinguishing the last light of mankind's spirit, breaking the one thing that had kept our species anchored to sanity. And in that moment, as Horus descended from the sky in a column of roaring warp fire, the world around me trembled, not in fear but in worship. And even my heart Tartarus, exhausted, threatened to kneel. I did not understand what it meant to witness the death of a god until I entered the inner palace after the fall, stepping over bodies that had turned to crystalline ash, melted armor plates fused to the marble, and the shadow of something colossal seared into the walls as if reality itself had been burned by a flame not meant for mortal eyes. And as I walked deeper through the mangled arteries of the Imperial dungeon, the air changed, growing heavier, wetter, almost biological, as if the palace had begun to rot from the inside out, its corridors pulsing faintly like the dying veins of an ancient beast, and every breath tasted of copper, incense, blood, and sorrow. The custodians who survived guided us forward in silence, their once golden armor now stained with creeping black veins, like corruption had threaded through the cracks of the metal, and their eyes, those unbreakable warriors, looked hollowed out, as though something inside them had been scooped away when the Emperor's light collapsed, leaving them moving only by duty and memory rather than hope. And even then some faltered, pausing to press a hand against the wall as if hearing whispers inside it, soft murmurs calling them by names no living tongue should know. We passed through the ruined hall of Leng, where once 1,000 statues of heroes stood unmoving, but now each statue had twisted subtly, their faces stretched in silent screams, their stone eyes bleeding streams of black dust, as though the warp had reached backward through time and reshaped every symbol of imperial glory into monuments of torment. And for the first time since the siege began, I wondered whether Terra itself wished to die, exhausted by endless devotion and sacrifice, yearning for release from the weight of a god who could no longer protect it. And when we finally reached the antechamber of the Golden Throne, I felt something shift beneath my feet, a faint, rhythmic pulse, almost like a heartbeat struggling to continue after death. And the custodian nearest me whispered, barely audible, "Do you feel it? Terra is breathing wrong." And indeed the floor vibrated with a rhythmic tremor, the sound of a world trying to cling to life while something vast and unseen tried to pull it into the warp one cell at a time. Inside the throne room, the air was thick like mud, shimmering with oily colors that hurt the eyes, and at the center where, once the Emperor sat in radiant stillness, there was only ruin. The Golden Throne itself cracked down the middle like a ribcage split open, molten gold hardened into jagged black glass, and the psychic conduits that once channeled his power now floated aimlessly, dripping with warp fluid that steamed as it hit the floor, forming pools that reflected not the room, but alien skies and dead stars from realities that should not touch ours. And scattered around the shattered throne were the remaining custodians who had reached him too late, their bodies folded like broken statues, each face turned toward him, even in death, as if refusing to look away from their god even during his final breath. In the center of the ruin, atop the smoking fragments of the throne, lay what remained of the Emperor, not radiant, not divine, not even recognizably human, but a hollowed husk of blackened bone and faintly glowing ash, as though his entire being had combusted from within, consumed not by an enemy blade, but by the weight of infinite betrayal and the unbearable pressure of countless futures collapsing at once. And as I stared at him, something stirred, a whisper, faint but unmistakable, brushing against the inside of my skull like a dying ember begging for one last spark. "Do not look away." And every hair on my body rose as I felt the echo of a presence that was no longer alive, but not entirely gone, lingering like the afterimage of a star that exploded centuries ago. Before any of us could speak, the air tore open near the shattered dais, a slow, deliberate rip-like cloth being pulled apart by invisible claws, and through it stepped Horus, not the Warmaster of legend, not the noble son the Imperium once adored, but a creature reforged in the forges of the warp, his armor shifting like liquid obsidian, symbols of the Four carved into his flesh with glowing wounds that pulsed in rhythm with the heartbeat of the rift behind him. And his eyes, "Emperor, forgive me." His eyes were pits of swirling galaxies, each spinning with impossible storms of souls screaming in endless orbit. And when he looked at the Emperor's remains, there was no triumph in his expression, only satisfaction laced with something colder than hate, inevitability. He raised one gauntlet hand and the warp reacted instantly, tendrils of colorless fire writhing around his fingertips, reaching toward the remains of the Emperor as if drawn by hunger. And I realized with horror what he intended, not merely to destroy, but to consume. To erase even the memory of the Emperor from existence and remake the galaxy in his own twisted image, powered by the Four as their chosen god-slave, their puppet king of damnation. and as the first tendril of warp flame touched the Emperor's skull, the room screamed walls, stone, air. Reality itself screamed as if witnessing something that should never be allowed to occur. A cosmic crime echoing across every timeline, and the shockwave that followed knocked us to our knees, ripping breath from our lungs, tearing tears of blood from our eyes. I felt consciousness slipping, darkness closing around me like a drowning tide, and the last thing I saw before blacking out was Horus lifting the Emperor's burning skull in both hands, lifting it toward the widening warp rift behind him like a grotesque offering, and the Legion of the Damned appearing in the flames for a heartbeat, spectral witnesses before vanishing again, powerless to intervene as chaos claimed the final victory that would unmake the destiny of mankind forever. By the time we reached what remained of the Cadian Gate, I could no longer tell if the ground beneath my boots was solid or a living extension of the warp itself, each step sending tremors up my legs as though the planet's flesh recoiled from the touch of mortals, and all around me, the ruins of once proud fortifications had been melted into grotesque shapes that defied geometry, towers curling like molten wax, banners rearranging themselves into sigils that pulsed and shifted under the gaze of unblinking demon eyes. The sky above burned a violent crimson, torn with endless warp lightning, and each flash revealed glimpses of the Warmaster astride a demon steed of black fire, his form, towering limbs, elongated in ways the eye could not fully perceive, every movement sending psychic shockwaves that screamed into the minds of the living, twisting courage into terror, faith into despair, and memory into madness. And as I huddled behind a fractured wall, a few ragged survivors beside me gasping, I understood that we were witnessing not a battle, but the unmaking of reality itself, a transformation in which humanity would become a mere footnote in the sprawling dominion of the dark gods. Every command we had been trained to follow was now meaningless, every prayer rendered impotent, and even the most steadfast soldiers, the remnants of Cadian regiments who had once held the gate, against impossible odds were now reduced to trembling figures, their weapons useless against the psychic onslaught radiating from Horus, whose presence seemed to drain the air of hope, leaving only a thick, suffocating fog of inevitability. And I could feel my own mind beginning to fray, fragments of thought dissolving into whispers I could not control, memories of home, of my family, of the Emperor's teachings dissolving into the hum of distant screaming. The survivors whispered of what had happened across the wider Imperium. Guilliman's fleets scattered and shattered by warp storms the moment Terra fell, of Magnus's red ships burning in psychic reflux as they tried to aid Terra, of Vulcan lost somewhere in the shattered corridors of Mars, and of Sanguinius whose death had rippled like a psychic tidal wave across the galaxy, leaving loyalists to fight on blindly against an enemy that had transcended both body and mind. I saw entire regiments crumble under the psychic assault of demons that walked in the guise of their former brothers, their faces twisted, mouths smiling with pleasure at the agony they inflicted. And I understood then that survival was no longer physical, it was mental, and even the strongest minds could not resist for long the insidious whispers of Horus, speaking of power, eternity, and the futility of resisting the inevitable. I pressed myself against the shattered wall of a ruined barracks, clutching a data slate that contained nothing but fragments of reports and fragments of memory, and I realized that the galaxy itself had become a living nightmare, every planet, every star, every fragment of light now subject to the whims of the ascended Warmaster and the gods who fed from his triumph. The air smelled of molten ceramite, burning flesh, and ozone, and distant explosions shook the ruins as entire regiments were swallowed by folds in reality, their screams echoing as if bouncing through empty, warped corridors in a palace of endless torment. I could not even call upon my own brothers, for the Raven Guard had been scattered, their numbers reduced to whispers and shadow, and the few Astartes I saw moved like ghosts, fighting enemies that shifted with every blink, and every time I closed my eyes, I saw Horus's silhouette towering over the Imperial Palace, his body now part flesh, part warp, part machinery, glowing with the fires of uncountable conquered worlds, and his gaze fell upon me in that moment, and I knew he could see every thought, every secret fear, every weakness I had ever known. The survivors tried to move, but the corridors had shifted, stretched, warped like the interior of a demon's stomach, and even when we thought we had found a passage to safety, the floor would open beneath us, revealing a swirling pit of black energy from which limbs and faces emerged, screaming silently, begging to be pulled back into the warp. We stumbled forward regardless, driven by the need to flee, though there was no destination, no hope, only the instinct to survive a reality that had been rewritten entirely in the image of chaos. and I understood at last that Terra had become not a planet, but a cathedral of despair, an altar to the gods, and we were its prey, mere sacrifices in the triumph of a son who had broken the universe with a single, deliberate act. I do not know how many hours, days, or subjective eternities we wandered, my mind fraying with every step, seeing shadows that were not shadows, hearing voices that were not voices, until finally, in what felt like the center of an impossible labyrinth, we found a chamber untouched by fire but filled with unnatural calm, and inside, the relics of the Imperium's last command, scribes, data vessels, and maps etched in memory circuits. Yet every one of them hummed with psychic interference, as if the very air of that room had absorbed the chaos from above and now breathed it back in, whispering promises of power, death, and submission. And I realized that the galaxy was no longer ours to record, no longer ours to fight for, but ours only to witness as it dissolved beneath the claws of the Warmaster and his patron gods. I wrote these words as we cowered in the shadows of that chamber, each sentence a prayer, each syllable an attempt to hold on to sanity, knowing that by the time anyone read them, the Imperium would be unrecognizable, Terra consumed, Horus ascended, and humanity forever broken, leaving only ashes, whispers, and memories of a civilization that had dared to dream of the stars before chaos showed its teeth. Asterisk.